Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fahzaly Advice. I appreciate y'all being here, for spending your time and listening. I hope you find value in my words, and I hope you do enjoy. Now, let's get on into it, shall we? Our submission today comes from trying to be a good guy, or trying to be the good guy. Dear Fahza, my significant other and a mutual friend of ours recently had a verbal throwdown. This argument revealed some fundamental differences in opinion that we didn't know previously. I'm not comfortable revealing the nature of these differences, I'm sorry. The argument came to an end when my significant other shut down and walked out. This left our friend completely taken aback and caused them to leave. At the moment, I feel caught in the middle due to the tension and my significant other refusing to talk about the situation. I am trying hard to stay neutral because both people are important to me. Obviously, I am loyal and supportive to my spouse. However, over the years, I have also become a close confidant to our friend. At this point, my spouse just wants to move on and forget it ever happened. But our friend, whom we see often, has obvious resentment that there was no closure to the subject. That being said, as of late, my neutrality has started to feel forced and uncomfortable. Do I say something to my friend to alleviate the tension and yet be disloyal to my spouse? Or do I remain neutral and risk losing a good friend? Signed, trying to be a good guy. Alright, so let's get into this because there is a lot, and I mean a lot to go over and a lot to be said here. Now, in this situation, personally, what I believe is there is an obvious, and I mean obvious, lack of communication here that needs to be addressed because, as I've said in previous episodes, when it comes to relationships, and I don't mean just romantic relationships, I mean relationships in general, your friends, your family, people you want to continue to keep around. Communication is key. If there's a problem, you need to talk about it. If there's something wrong, you need to talk about it. Because the only way anything is ever going to get resolved is if there's a discussion. And if the only thing you're afraid is if that discussion is going to get heated, then that is just all the more reason to tackle this problem head on. Because if you don't, all it's going to do is crumble in ways that you might not even have expected. Nothing good comes from holding back. And I say that tentatively. I don't mean you need to go all out and just completely stop considering the context and nuance. You're going to hear me say that a lot because it's something that I seem to, at the very least, experience in public. People have seemed to have forgotten these basic concepts of context and nuance. Not every situation can be judged by the situation beforehand, and not every moment is definable by a standard. That's not what life is. Life has no standardization. It is a exploding ball of chaos that is never ending in its consistency of inconsistencies. So you can't think you know where it's going to go when you haven't even taken that step forward. Sorry for moving around a lot. I'm just trying to get comfortable here. But let's get back to it. So, like I said, communication. This is obviously a conversation that needs to be had with all parties, including yourself. Letting your feelings be known, that you feel torn in the middle, and you are having these qualms about everything that went on, even though you're not comfortable revealing the nature of those differences. Differences are what make life. We can't expect everybody to be the same. Differences in opinions are going to happen, no matter how fundamental they are. It's a matter of whether or not you're going to allow those fundamental differences. If they challenge you fundamentally as a person, your priorities, and what is important to you, that's something that you need to consider. That's something that your significant other needs to consider, as well as your friend. But there needs to be a moment where that can be laid on the table for everybody to discuss and see. And is this going to be easy? Hell no, it's not going to be easy. It's not meant to be easy. Because, as I've said time and time again, anything worth doing is going to be difficult. It's going to have its hardships, its pitfalls. It's all part of the learning process, though. And when it comes to relationships, relationships are a consistent learning process, because you and your partner are two living people who change over time. Every day you wake up, you're different than what you were yesterday. It might not be a significant change. It might not be something you notice, but it happens. With everything we experience, we are different. And every day we experience more and more. And this all needs to be considered. It's all part of being in a partnership with someone else. Because you can't consider them like you, because they're not you. So remember that. Now, first question that needs to be answered here is, what do you want? Trying to be the good guy, what do you want here? Because you obviously care about both of these people. But here's a few things that I don't think you've considered. Maybe you have. These are assumptions because this isn't information that was given in these submissions, and I know not everything can be said. So the best I can give you is based off of my assumptions. But despite these fundamental differences that both you and your significant other and your friend have, you care for both of them. And that argument didn't change that. And I'm sure both of them care about you. And I doubt that they would want to be in a position where they caused you any form of suffering because of a disagreement that they had. But it needs to be brought to the table. Nothing can happen without it having a starting point. And that starting point begins with the conversation. A clear-cut conversation that, at best, and I mean at best because this is difficult to do, is devoid of subtext, so that you can say, all three members in this particular situation can say their piece, to say what bothers them, what they need, and what they want, which will allow for all three people in this situation to potentially reach a solution that isn't simply just a compromise, but is a solution that all members can find a form of closure and satisfaction over, and that you can truly move on. Your partner wants to move on and forget it ever happened. That's not going to be how it goes, because it's not like that. You can't just push it under the rug and walk away. Because guess what? It didn't disappear. It didn't go away. It's still under that dang rug. What you gonna do about it? Just ignore it? Eventually, it's gonna become part of you. And it'll grow. And you know what it usually grows into? Resentment. It turns toxic when you hold things like that in and you don't talk about it. And you just want to move on and forget it ever happened. But it still festers and it's still there. Because you can't just move on and forget it. You got to get through it to get to it. If you want to move on, then you got to face it. It's not something that just goes away. You might think it does. You might think it just disappears. There are many people who wish that's how it works. But it's still there. It happened. Nothing will change that this argument or whatever event happened. But what can build from that event is growth. Growth that you, your partner, and your friend can find in this situation. But I also want you to remember this. There's what you want, and there's what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen because you haven't obviously brought the situation to the table and had this point of conversation, or at the very least, you've tried and it's not gone the way you wanted. Either way, that doesn't mean stop trying. But, sorry. When it comes down to brass tacks, like I said, there's what you want and there's what happens. More often than not, when we tackle a situation, we may not get what we want, but we will get what we need. Facing the situation rather than running from it. Because everything in life comes back in one way or another. And the longer you let it sit, the longer you run from it, the harder it's going to hit when it hits you. So, the question still stands. What do you want? Answer that. Bring it all and lay it all bare to both your significant other and your friend. You deserve to have a voice in this as well if you're stuck in the middle or you feel that way at the very least. If she wants to move past it and move on, then start the process. But that process does not begin with forgetting it. It begins with facing it. Too many people are apt to run away from their problems, and what does it do? Nothing. The problems are still there. They're not going to go away. Even facing them doesn't mean that they're going to go away. But it puts yourself in a position that you're learning, that you're growing. And eventually you'll get to a point where you're better apt and better able to face these problems. And you can do it. You can. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. I tell you right now, just from reading this submission, it's not going to be fun to have this conversation, to bring this up to your friend and to your significant other. But you got to bring both parties to the table. You cannot. Well, you can, but it won't. It will go really bad if you do this. I do not recommend you treat both of them separately. That you try to talk to your spouse, or you try to talk to your friend without your spouse, or you say nothing. All of those options, in my opinion, are terrible options that lead to nothing but a breakdown of the system, the breakdown of the relationship. And it just poisons it. In this letter, you haven't, from what I can assume, because it's not in here. You haven't considered the thought process of once again tackling this by bringing both you, your friend, and your significant other to the table. But instead of presenting it in a sense of this is your problem A and your problem B, present it in a sense of, hey, I love both of you. This is how this is making me feel. I know you want to move on, and I know you want to talk about it. But this is how I feel. And just maybe, if they care enough about you, this will start to open their eyes. And you might not get the result you want immediately. You might end up being another big fight. But that doesn't mean that you didn't make progress there by stepping forward, by facing the problem. Remember, progress is seldom seen by those who make it. But until you take that step and move forward, all you have is a state of consistent atrophy because you're not doing anything about it. And I know it's scary, but it being scary and you being afraid is no reason not to face it. You can do this. You can, all right? And I hope that this helped you trying to be the good guy. Because this is, one, a situation that I have seen, I have experienced myself, and I do not envy anybody in that situation. But I can tell you that the problems only got better through communication, through saying something, through being open. Because that's what a relationship is. It's a partnership. It's about being able to be open. It's a two-way street. Remember that.
Well, hey everybody. Did you know that Agent Fahzaly Gamer has a Patreon?
That's right, and Random Skull is here to help tell you about it.
And that's right, we're doing this announcement together.
And when you subscribe to Patreon, you get to see content early, and of course, make requests for content on YouTube, and even on Twitch and TikTok. It's all up to you.
And of course, if you want to support Agent Fahzaly Gamer, check out these links. And of course, there are also links in the link tree.
And remember, when you subscribe to Patreon, you can also leave a message saying that Random Skull is better than Mr. Announcer.
Now, was that even really necessary?
Alrighty then, let's get on into that second submission, shall we? Dear Fahzaly, my youngest daughter is attending a wedding in her boyfriend's family. One of his aunts is getting married. The invitation came to her boyfriend and was addressed to the two of them. They do not live together, but they have been together for almost a year. Spending a lot of time together, she has met several of his extended family members. I suggested that she ask for their registry information so she can send a gift. She seemed unsure about doing that. Do you think that this is the right thing to do, or does she have any obligation to bring a gift? Should she just send a thank you note for being included among the wedding guests? Or should she do nothing but attend and enjoy? We really like her boyfriend and have met his parents and some of his family members. We just want to advise her to do the right thing. Signed, to gift or not to gift? Well, my response to this, I can assure you many people do not agree with me. See, I am a person that believes that we have no need to fulfill obligations, that obligations are nothing more than a cage for a standardization of something that isn't there. Sure, we can want to save face. We want to look good and present ourselves in some way, shape, or form. That's something people do. But ultimately, we have the freedom to do whatever it is that we want to do. No obligations to other people matter more than self. And that's something that I tell people a lot, because there are so many people out there that live their lives to fulfill the obligations to others without even considering themselves. And this is something that I do want people to start considering themselves, rather than the obligations and the viewpoints of people that aren't living their life for them. Remember, that's an important thing. Now, when it comes to what you want to do and what your daughter wants to do, you really need to consider that as completely separate. She's your daughter. She's going to do whatever it is that she wants to do in this situation. That's her boyfriend. And this being his aunt and a wedding that they were invited to, they don't necessarily have any obligation to bring a wedding gift. Sure, it's nice to do so. Sure, it's courteous. But there's no law that says you have to do it. And honestly, I don't know. The weddings that I have been to, every wedding that I have ever attended and even catered in my 15 years within the food industry, the only people who ever gave wedding gifts were immediate family. There was no obligation for someone's girlfriend or significant other to bring a separate gift. If her and her boyfriend are together, they can just bring a gift together, as it is her boyfriend's aunt and her boyfriend's aunt's wedding. They were invited together. Why not bring a gift together? Or do they have any obligation to bring a gift at all, seeing as they're minors being invited to an adult wedding? Well, they're probably in college or along those lines, but they're still not necessarily the adults that are attending this particular celebration, who have financial means to be able to fulfill these unnecessary obligations for the sake of family. Now, like I said, I can already feel it in the comments. There's going to be someone with some animosity behind that, saying, oh no, you have to do this because of this and that. You really don't. That's the beauty of free will. You don't. Unless there's a specific law that will enact some form of physical consequence. The only consequence that appears here is people's feelings and how they view you. Or your daughter, in this case. In that instance, if it's so important to you, why not you send the gift, seeing as you're the one making the suggestion? It seems to be a better point than trying to force your daughter to do something that you believe is an obligation, but she does not. And though this was not the point of this particular submission, it also needs to be said that there are so many parents out there that think that they have some sort of control over their kids. And it's a power trip that they have, almost. And they seem to forget. Your children are individuals. They have autonomy, and that needs to be respected. They have the right to make their own decisions, and that needs to be respected. If this is something your daughter is unsure of, let her come to her own decision. And if you feel the need and obligation to send a gift, take responsibility and do it. But don't put that on your daughter. Let her figure that out for herself. I know, as a parent, you want what's best for your child. Ultimately, a lot of parents seem to be blinding themselves with that sentiment, without understanding that what's best for their child is for them to grow in their own, as their own person, to make their own decisions and their own mistakes. And more than likely, this is also something that needs to be discussed with the boyfriend. They are the connection to this particular family and this wedding. And they're the one, along with your daughter, that were invited. Were they not? If you were invited, this would be a completely different situation, because the gift obligation would be on you and you alone. But you weren't. Your daughter was. And her boyfriend, who is the nephew to the person getting married. And therein lies their choices. What will they do? My recommendation here is take your own advice. If you think that this is the right thing to do, do it. But be accountable for how you feel and what you want. Don't put that on your children, because it's not their responsibility to do what you want. If you want something to happen, make it happen. Don't use your children as an excuse for it, though. And I'm sure this isn't the answer that you wanted from this submission. And I'm sorry to say that there's going to be often times where I'm going to give answers that people might not like, people might not agree with. But I am in a philosophy, a standpoint that people need to realize that no matter what connections you believe you have, ultimately in this life, you only truly have you. Because the experiences that come to life, the pain, the joy, and everything else in between, you're the one that experiences them. You're the one that lives it. Why is there any need to consider what other people want from you? It's a matter of what do you want, and take accountability for that. Do you want friends? Do you want people to like you? Then you act accordingly. But you don't do it as a slave to obligation. Do it because you want to. Because that's genuine. Because that means so much more than I'm just doing this because you're going through the motions of what you think life should be. There's no rule book. There's no standardization. Life is yet to be truly and fully defined. And that definition is for you and you alone to discover. But it stops with that. It stops with you. I see too many people trapping themselves in the thought process of other people. And it just muddles things up too much. It's one thing to be considerate. It is. But it's another to be drowned in your considerations. And I don't think that's something that's talked about enough. But it's important. It is. Because we are not our obligations. We are living people. We have wants, we have needs. And if we don't consider that and don't take accountability for that, we have lived a life that is nothing more than what other people wanted. How much meaning is there in that? You don't need to live for others. Live for you. Find those choices. So, my biggest recommendation and advice to gift or not to gift is, if you feel the need, give a gift. But take accountability for what you feel you need. And let your daughter make her own decision of whatever it is that they want to do. Because there's nothing wrong with attending and enjoying. And it's great to send a thank you gift for being included. Or even a thank you note. Acknowledgement in itself is a gift. And it's so often underestimated. but it does matter. So, hopefully, this does give you something to think about, and that you found value in my words. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Fahzaly Advice, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Well, everybody, that's the end of Fahzaly Advice. I hope you did enjoy this episode and you found some value in what I said. And of course, if you are interested in participating, if you need some advice or some perspective, feel free to email the address at the end of this part. And remember, all submissions are 100% anonymous. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Need some perspective? Need some advice? Want your submission read on podcast? Well, email Fahza at fahzalyadvice@gmail.com. And remember, all submissions are 100% anonymous unless requested upon.